to thinking about how we could use the router in interesting ways to create panels or decorative patterns for some potential use. I had this idea of them being individual panels, almost like making your own tiles. I'm going to be using a cove box bit, which is shaped like this. It's not this size. See that? We've used this before for something else. I forget what. But that's the cove box bit. So this can plunge and in the router and create a nice little cove shape slot. So I prepped these panels. These are square. They're just about 4.5 inch square. And they're only about 5/8 thick. So what I wanted to do, I used in the way I've done before with a router, and when we've made circles, we've made a circle cutting jig or a circle describing jig with our router, we attach the router to a flat panel, and then you can drill a hole at any distance from the cutter head to create your radius, and the router just circles your center hole. So you can cut any kind of circles. It's a super quick, efficient way to get an accurate circle cut. So I'm using that principle where I mounted this smaller router to a panel, to just a short piece of 1/2 inch plywood. What I'm doing here today could be blown up to gigantic proportions. All right, you could do wall art with this if you can let your imagination go, and who knows, somebody might take this and run with it. And I'm sure this has been done before, but never like this. I'm selling it hard, huh? All right, and here we go. All I did was I started out with a stained piece of plywood. So I just had some Baltic birch. I'll just describe this real quick in case anybody has interest. That's a 1/2 inch thick, and I made it the width of my plate on this smaller DeWalt plunge router. Okay, so it's just like 5 3/4, and then the overall is like 10 inches long. I drilled a center hole with like a 5/8 bit, just so that I could see the router bit go down. Now, I've got a core box bit in there that looks just like this, except it's the mini version. It's just a 3/8 inch. Can you see that? It's a 3/8 inch diameter. So it's going to cut a much smaller cove. And it's just going to be plunged to about a little over an 1/8 inch depth. Then you probably already noticed, because it's 3/8, I made little, I drill holes. I spaced them at 3/8 inch increments right down the center line. So that's going to become my axis. Now, if I pivot on any one of those holes, that's going to be my radius. If I can get a pin down through that 1/8 inch hole into the table, I could just spin on that radius. And so wherever I go, I'm going to get whatever that radius is out on my cutter head. Now, rather than I wanted to change the radius because I want to create these concentric circles, almost like sound waves or ripples on a pond. So I thought it'd be fun to do this kind of thing with our little test panel, make a few different designs. Now, I know your imagination is so much better. You're going to take this and run with it. I know it. All I did was, if you check this out, right down on the table here, I've already messed around with it a little so you can see these little cuts. But for my little squares that are pretty consistent, I wanted something to hold them down while I was doing this routing in them. So I just set them on the table, and then I had some stock, and I just boxed right around it. I tried not to slam them super tight, but they're very snug, so it barely moves in there, okay? Then I got to thinking, after I'm done routing it, how am I going to get it out of there? So I just ended up drilling a hole from the bottom so I could push this out. Okay, that's why that hole is there, right? It's that simple. Then I thought I wanted two approaches of the axis. I want one that comes perpendicular to an edge or parallel to the other side, so that I'm going to be making sweeping cuts this way that radiate greater and greater going this way. And then if I want to do the other side, do another side, I just turn it. And I can try the radiating there or across from each other and see what happens, okay? Then I put another axis coming in at a 45. So I would get more of the curvature cutting in diagonally and see what that does. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to take the same drill bit that I drilled all these holes, which is just a 1/8 inch bit, and that's going to be my pin for rotating on, okay? And I drilled a hole here. This is the hole that I'm going to be pivoting on, and this was the one for over there. So I just cut down a pin that was, this is actually like a nail stock that was 1/8 inch in diameter. So if you were going to, whenever you're trying to jig something up to go faster and do this like production run of anything, you're always thinking of these little things that can make it go more efficiently and keep it accurate, okay? So I just cut this down and I set it in there. I rounded off the tip, so instead of changing it every time, I could just find the first one, and then after I route that concentric or that circle, I'm just going to slide it forward until I feel it drop down into the next one, okay? And I just kept, that's how it goes much faster that way. Since we're on the corner, let's start on the corner and let's make one happen, all right? I'm going to just plunge each time and I'll rotate and we'll go ahead and get this corner done and then we'll see what we got. All right, here we go. All right, let's take a look. There you have it. Kind of an interesting geometry going on there. We've got those radiating ripples. So there, we've got those. And I could go all the way across, but I think it'll be nice for the eye to have some untouched surface for contrast, okay? So here I've got this one. Now I'm going to rotate it just 90 degrees and we'll hit this corner. So now we're going to go in and I'm going to just hit on this diagonal corner. Let's see what happens. All right, let's check it out. All right, there we go. We've got really kind of an interesting pattern going now. We end up with these diamonds. So here we have like these sharper points because they're coves coming in, but it's pretty dynamic because of the change in the curvature as they collide there.
Any thought on reducing chip out? Same thing as tear out?
Yeah, you know, I was quite surprised by making these cuts. I experienced little to none. I mean, this could be sanded after and there's no breakouts. And you saw how fast I was moving. And on the edges, I would just sand. The thing is, after you're done, there's no saying you're stuck with a square. You could use a square and arrange them with other panels that you might have made for something. Or you could cut, circles after the fact, or whatever shape you want. You're just using your basic shape to start with. So what else we got?
Yeah. Dean says fill the grooves in with epoxy for a coaster.
Ooh. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, I like that.
And then you could also try, Dan says, varying the spacing so you would have concentric circles but increase distance between each, like 3/8, then 1/2, then 5/8.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. I was thinking about that when I made all these holes. I am pretty consistent, but because I knew if I went further apart, I'd have a flat between these coves, which we've got more of a sharp feeling there. If I had the round over, I think that would work better because you could come in. You could even, do a little carving in there. It's as if you're carving with the router, but you're doing it in a very kind of hard geometric way. But I do really like that idea of filling this with epoxy. Think about this. You fill it with epoxy, and then you let it cure like level, and then you can sand it to thickness. Like you can start sanding it down. And as you go down, you're going to be exposing more wood, and the epoxy lines would get narrower. So you could create like really interesting patterning, like epoxy inlay, using router bits in such a way that you could use a straight cutter and sweep. And then if you could offset it slightly, you could cut the corresponding inlay on the contrasting wood if you wanted to inlay. But I was saying you could achieve almost that look by the epoxy idea that Dean mentioned. You fill it up and sand it down or whatever. I mean, this is just the spark of an idea. So let's do one more and see where it leads us. So this one I'm going to put in, and we'll go perpendicular this time. I'll use this hole. Okay, here we go. All right, how many did we do there? Okay, so here we've got a similar look, but now we've got this flatter kind of cut going. Let's go 90 degrees and see what that looks like. Yes, it is. I got to stay over here. See what we get. All right. So similar to the other one, really, but we end up with the crosshatch pattern coming out of the corner. So now you have a variety of shapes happening. Got the peaks, the curves flaring out, and then a flat area here. Contrasted to this one, it's basically the same pattern, but coming in from the corner. That's an example of how you can use your router in creative ways. Now, I've got a few other panels here that explore different combinations. Here's the curve coming in from both sides, like two rocks dropped in and they're about to collide, but they didn't collide yet. And then we've got, this is when they do collide. And they kind of wipe each other out with this method. It's not like the sound waves. This loses it here, but you get these points. Each side is making some nice points. But you're kind of canceling each other out in the middle. So that one has a little different look to it. Okay. And then here's one like we made. Here's one going a little further than we did, so the points get kind of smaller and sharper. if you notice as you get further up. And then here's one going complete, and you just wipe the whole thing out with points. So I don't know, this could make like a press as well, some type of, you could use it as a stamp of some sort as well. These things could be stamps if you made some kind of pattern that you really liked. I did see a guy, Sean, I think his name was, where he did this type of cut from one side deep enough, now, I don't remember if it was circle or straight line or whatever it was, then flipped it over and did it opposite the other side. So you actually broke through. And so it was double-sided, and you had the holes, so you could use that as some type of trivet or whatever.
Yeah, it was mentioned of doing 2 different colored woods.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could laminate almost a la Tim Coleman. If some of you were here for the Epic Weekend last year, you know, you could laminate on here with a 16th inch or an 1/8 inch thick material. So then when you make your cuts, you're just going through and you're exposing the lighter colored wood down there. That's
really beautiful.
That's a great idea. Yeah, imagine how all these peaks would look if they were all just dark.
Yeah, this is just a scratch in the surface, no pun intended.